What can be said about the old world that hasn't been said before? Oh wait, it's actually all based on nostalgia, so it's meant to have been said before. I actively shouldn't say anything new, in fact. Like, I should not point to modern, well-performing game design and discuss the benefits of these systems and how they are significantly more engaging, and how if we, had moved past nostalgia-based sales, we would be better for it. But then, when it comes to movies and games, everything's a sequel, so maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe old is good. Maybe the old world is the good world. Good news then, I have forgotten everything I ever knew about Warhammer Fantasy. At one point I owned a Dark Elf and Wood Elf army, unpainted, obviously. As you mean to go on. Looking back at it all now, Wood Elves are my jam, or if you're American, my jelly. For which I am led to understand, you are not ready. In this hasty review of the old world, I will not be reviewing the game because that would be foolish. How can you review a rule set that you've owned for a full-blown 6 hours? I can give my first impressions, but more importantly, I can tell you how it makes me feel as a product. Because as a product, it's intriguing to me, and I want to tell you how it makes me feel and how much of that is nostalgia blindness, and we shall get into that. Now, you've no doubt already seen my price breakdown of the revealed old world prices, and if you're on this video at all, then the price is as pointless to you as it is to me. Either you're here to reinforce confirmation bias because your mind is already made up and you're consuming as much thought content as possible, or it's too expensive and there's too much hobby and you were never going to get into this anyway. If you want an unboxing and a look through of all of these goodies, that's up for my patrons. Naught but a glorified tip jar, but I do try and give you plenty of extra videos, like about all sorts of random stuff, so check that out if you're super cool. Although my channel is almost exclusively skirmish gaming, so how does Old World relate to that? The opposite. It's the opposite. Skirmish gaming is a rebellion against rank and flank. Maybe you're an old man like me and you never played Fantasy or any rank and flank. If you've ever thought rank and flank, more like rank, flank and wank, then you may just be a skirmish capital G gamer like me. So let's start there. What is the Old World in fact? The old world is my traditional fantasy. It's what I grew up on. I didn't grow up on Tolkien or D&D, Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that. Warhammer Fantasy was my baseline. When I found out that black powder pistols weren't normal in fantasy, I was shocked because they were normal in my traditional fantasy. Since then I've moved on, I'm more into the whole arcano-punk thing these days, more cartoony, but Warhammer Fantasy is my tradition. It is an old school rank and flank game. As with most GW games at the time, they took historical wargaming, added traditional fantasy races and gave them real world analogous vibes. This means you have troops that line up in ranks across wide open fields, much like Napoleonic soldiers did, and instead of moving individuals, you move the unit as a whole. This gives the ranks of units a front, side and rear facing. When you charge, you get a bonus for not charging directly into someone's face. A side can be called a flank, and so if you can charge into their flank, you have done a good thing, and that's why it's called rank and flank wargaming. We then have half of the reason why the old world died all those years ago. Generic fantasy races. Good elves, bad elves, neutral elves. German humans, French humans. Dusty skeletons, wet skeletons. Aztec lizardmen. Short little girls that write in their diaries. Yes, that's a fantasy race apparently. Proper orcs. Probably other stuff too, but you get it. Basically, everything couldn't be copyrighted, so they binned it for elves. Travesty, yeah. Then they created Age of Sigmar, a move widely regarded as phenomenal and has never received any criticism, especially for its first attempt at a rule set without any points values. Bold, daring, and avant-garde. Moving on. Very, very briefly, the gameplay is conceptually simple. Line up your two armies. It's a phased game, so one player moves everything, charges everything, shoots everything, fights everything, whatever. It used to be the case there was a magic phase. Now there isn't, and magic is just an ability that you use in the relevant phase, similar to 40k and psychic powers. Try and charge into people's flanks, obviously. As we can see in the book, and for the Warcom articles, they are not wanting you to use dense terrain. This really should be an open field, with just a few bits to make the board look kind of interesting, like there's a thing there, but have no actual effect. Now, I've watched the tutorials, I've watched the battle report, I've read the rulebook-ish, I've looked at the plastic models that are older than some viewers of my channel, 2003, these bad boys are. If your kids are early to mid-teens, these sculpts are older than them and actively designed to be static so that they fit neatly in their ranks and flanks. They've made some changes, and I'm sure they're all good changes, but are they going to make me like the game? To raw dog the hobby with my throbbing, heavily loaded paintbrush and then play what has to be at least a 5-hour game, if 40k in Age of Sigmar are anything to go by? I thoroughly doubt it. Is this a good and fun game? I don't know, because this was sent to me by GW one day before this video goes live. Thank you to Games Workshop for that, by the way, and a shame it got lost in the mail, is what it is, because I should have had it for a lot longer, but oh well. So anyway, let's gush over some geeky fantasy stuff instead of worrying about all this silly mechanics and what the game actually is, practicality boringness. Okay, so I've sounded pretty down on Old World so far, or neutral I guess, so any blind fanboys have left, good. Now let me annoy everyone that has stayed by becoming positive about the Old World, oh my god. Or as positive as it's possible for me to be, not much. Let's start with bases. Square bases in fact, look bad. Sorry, those are the objective and uncontestable facts, suck it. However, the move from 20mm squares to 25mm squares is top notch. This lets you put your models on 25mm round bases and they fit within the 25mm square base slots, so they rank up correctly and can then be played in other game systems, so that's awesome. And in my opinion, I do think giving each model a bit more breathing space on the base improves how they look. As we all know, painting is 90% bases and faces, and if the base is too small to do anything with, the new models look solid, fine, acceptable. They didn't go Age of Sigmar mad dynamic poses with them, they kept them grounded. This Pegasus Lord and Banner Pimp looks sweet, almost as good as the Lost Kingdom 3D printed Rage, and that's saying something, but not as good as them, to clarify. Mordheim has the old school models you can use again now, which is nifty I guess, so I'm happy about that. In fact, I fully intend to make a Bretonnian warband out of these models and film a little battle report with new models for Mordheim in 2024. Isn't that mad? Right, practical positives out of the way, let's talk vibes and products. Super quick. Movement trays seem fine. Card sleeves seem fine. Cards themselves, also fine. Weird size. No notes. Inside the box itself, everything is exactly as you'd expect. It's a large mountain of shame that you will never finish, and that's a choice you've made. You knew it when making the purchase. Are the new sculpts good? Yes. Are the old sculpts good? Objectively, not great, no. They're very static, and detail's fine, and the mould line's not super, which is a bit of a shame. All of that out of the way, let's talk about the book. Okay, so this is a crisp cut of meat, my chaps, chapesses, and chapai. Now, I actually really like the layout and organisational structure of the Age of Sigmar rulebook, and I don't feel this reaches those heady heights, and I haven't been able to actually use this in anger, as I've mentioned, so I can't comment too deeply on usability. But it's laid out in standard GW style. What does that mean? It means that they will probably mention a few rules at the beginning that they don't actually explain until further on, making the whole thing feel a bit disjointed on first read. In fairness, writing a rulebook for a wargame is really hard, so this is barely a criticism, just a note. As always, the best way to learn the game will be to have someone else take you through a game, then watch a YouTube video explaining it, then finally read the rulebook yourself. Ideally, you will want to also set up these test scenarios from the rulebook, like as the book explains it, so that you can see them happening and force yourself to implement the rule, not just accidentally tune out as you read it. The diagrams for rules explanations are great though. Again, not sure if they've actually, they're correct and relevant, but to just flick through, they look bold and vibrant and stand out and look good, giving the page a pleasing look. I do want to unabashedly criticise something though, just very briefly, and this is a personal bugbear of mine, and it's going to be the unit entries. What we see here is a total lack of innovation. I'm sorry, but old school gaming doesn't have to mean boring Excel spreadsheet for a stat line. It's just bad, and this is coming from GW, who have been pushing towards easier to read stat lines for years in other games. Shame. Also, in the Bretonnian card pack, no data cards. You don't get the stat lines. Then we get to the artwork, and this is where we get to what made me decide to actually do a video on this despite no experience with it, because I've had it for under a day, so what am I going to say? I recognise most of this artwork, and I'm willing to believe that they would go as far as to not have any new artwork in this book, which is mad, right? But hey, everything old is new again, so more for me for expecting anything. But I don't care. I can't tell you why or what, and so I have to assume that we have hit my personal nostalgia button and smashed just as hard as you have smashed the like button on this video. Thanks for that, by the way. I love sepia. They took all of their full coloured artwork and gave it a sepia wash, just like I do for my bone coloured armour Space Marines. Turns out, I just have a thing for sepia. I do not know why, but I'm loving all the artwork in this book. The sepia wash makes all of the disparate colours blend together and work as one uniform collection. It keeps the focus on the rules and doesn't distract, but is still evocative AF, as foretold. It makes every page allude to something grander. This is no mere shitty rank, flank and wank game. This is a world and then invites you to inhabit it. Join its denizens, bathe in sepia wash. And so for me, my nostalgia will lead me to buy all of the books for Old World Guaranteed, and I will even try the game when I have some free time, and maybe against all odds, I'll actually like it. I mean, I know myself and I doubt it, but you never know, right? I'm happy to indulge in the nostalgia of a world I used to live in. But I don't want to be there for dozens of hours before I get to the table and then dozens more at the table. Flicking through the world that once was is enough. I like it, but I don't want to live it. Stay happy, stay humble, stay polite.